In this video lesson, we'll look at the positions of the Patriots and Loyalists and the events of the American Revolution in the northern states. Victory in the Revolutionary War was not decided by events on the battlefields alone. Equally important was the contest that was waged on the home front. All of the colonies contained large numbers of people who were uncertain about the war, small numbers of very committed, highly motivated patriots, loyalists, and making the contest to win over allegiance of neutrals a major factor in the war. Loyalists struggled and plotted to maintain or reestablish monarchical authority and assist the British war efforts. Patriots, on the other hand, in the absence of British power, controlled local governments and used them to punish loyalists and intimidate neutrals into submission. Committees of correspondence, or committees of public safety and committees of inspection, controlled politics through enforcement of boycotts, signing up army draftees, monitoring suspected loyalists and traitors, and conducting searches and seizures of boycott goods. Loyalists were appalled and dismayed by the apparent arbitrary power these groups assumed as patriots. Women showed their patriotism at the local level as the hardships of war impacted their work routines by taking on responsibilities like running family farms, making business decisions in their husband's absence. In Philadelphia, the Ladies' Association, formed by women of prominent families, collected large amounts of money in support of the Continental Army. In 1776, about 20 to 30% of Americans were openly loyalist. Another 20 to 40% remained neutral, figures that revealed divisions which England could have used to save the colonies had her policies been more carefully thought out. American loyalists believed prosperity and stability rested on English rule, anchored by the monarchy, aristocracy, and shared cultural and economic ties. After attempting to remain neutral, many Indian tribes eventually allied with the British. The war ultimately divided the Iroquois Confederacy, the Mohawk, the Onondaga, the Cayuga, and the Seneca all allying with Britain, Tuscarora and Oneida allying with the Patriots. One powerful Christianized Mohawk leader, who was referred to as Joseph Brant by the Americans, pledged loyalty to King George in exchange for protection from encroaching American settlers. Loyalist pockets existed in all the colonies, in New England, frontier areas, all of the southern colonies, and the Indian country beyond the Appalachian Mountains. Loyalists were the most outspoken between 1774 and 1776, a time when full-scale war against England seemed unlikely. In June 1775, the Congress passed a resolution declaring Loyalists to be traitors, later further defining by colonial legislatures as acts of provisioning or joining the British Army, printing or stating anything subverting Patriot morale or interfering with Patriot recruitment for the Continental Army. Punishments ranged from house arrest and suspension of suffrage privileges to tarring and feathering. Other consequences were property confiscation, deportation, and sometimes outright acts of terrorism. Such laws and punishments reflected heated passions of the period, as well as denials of the right of conscience and freedom to own private property. This was an example of a democratic tyranny, often more feared than abused by the monarchy. During the war, approximately 80,000 Loyalists left the colonies. Of those, nearly 28,000 fled to Canada. They often suffered the confiscation of their estates, which were then sold to help finance the war. Nearly 50,000 Loyalists bore arms for the British, served as spies, or as agent provocateurs by inciting violence among the Indian tribes. After the war, most Loyalists chose to remain in the new United States, adjusting to changing political fortunes with varying degrees of success. During the war, no wholesale reign of terror comparable to that witnessed during the French and Russian revolutions occurred between the Patriots and the Loyalists. In late 1775, two small American armies set out to capture Montreal and Quebec. They wanted to prevent British reinforcements from arriving in Canada, and they also wanted to force British forces already in North America to divert some of their assets to protect Canada. In September 1775, one army, led by Richard Montgomery, captured Montreal and moved on to support General Benedict Arnold's army approaching Quebec. Arnold's army, moving through Maine, joined up with Montgomery's force in 1775. The battles of the Revolution in the North can be seen here. You may pause and look at the map. Between November and December 1775, the combined armies of Montgomery and Arnold lay siege to Quebec, failing to capture the fortress because they didn't have enough supplies, they didn't have enough men, and there was a smallpox epidemic that killed more men than those that actually fell to British fire. It was in New York, not Canada, that the first primary military action in the first year of war occurred. In March of 1776, British forces, commanded by General Howe, evacuated Boston and sailed to Halifax, Nova Scotia, to strategize and plan for the next phase of war. In August 1776, Howe returned with 35,000 British regulars and 80,000 Hessian mercenaries, landing south of New York City. Howe's force, carried abroad by 500 British warships, commanded by his brother, presented an awe-inspiring sight. However, Washington had moved his 20,000-man army from Massachusetts to New York, anticipating that that would be where Howe was heading. In August of 1776, at the Battle of Long Island, Washington's forces met Howe's well-trained regulars, resulting in a defeat that forced Washington to retreat across the Hudson River into New Jersey. Over the next 2 months, Washington's army skirmished with Howe's forces. In November, Washington was forced to retreat from New Jersey back into Pennsylvania. General Howe, whose forces followed Washington's army in a close chase, allowed his men a day of rest rather than to pursue his advantage and force a decisive battle. That was a mistake. At midnight on December 25, 1776, General Washington's army recrossed the Delaware River and marched on Trenton, New Jersey, quickly capturing 1,000 Hessians early that morning. This is a picture painted by an artist that shows Washington crossing the Delaware. On January 3, 1777, at the Battle of Princeton, Washington's army defeated a smaller British garrison and afterwards retreated to Morristown, New Jersey for their winter camp. The first year of the war produced few victories for the Continental Army. It barely survived being destroyed during General Howe's New York offensive. However, the Battle of Trenton and Princeton were very significant because it allowed General Washington to keep his troops enlisted and gave them a much-needed win to boost their morale. The first year of the war reveals Washington's mistakes as well as his moments of daring and brilliance on his part. It also revealed mistakes by Howe in failing to pursue and destroy the American Continental Army when he had the chance. We will learn more about the individual battles and their significance more during class time.